Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Thursday. It's August the 29th, and we are rolling live right now on Rumble, and we're on Facebook. And does anyone watch on Facebook? Why do we do that? We're on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. If you are joining us on any of those places, Twitter, X, let's get this thing started. We're dealing with a pretty interesting situation in this country right now. It continues to be the case, and so today's thumbnail actually reflects what I think needs to be a continuing focus on rules. Republicans love them. They appear to be absolutely saddled by the need to follow rules. And Democrats are completely uninterested. We're going to be talking about a series of court decisions, some of them at the Supreme Court, some of them the appeals level, where the Biden administration has simply pushed out and said, we're going to do whatever we want. We are going to decide to not follow the rules. We're going to make up rules as we go, and we're going to just shove it into the courts and make you fight it out. It's going to cost you a lot of money. We're going to make you do expenditures over a long period of time, and for a narrow little window, we're going to show what can be, unburdened by what is allowed, which is what maybe Kamala should be actually saying. They're not really interested in what the rules look like. And this is why I use this continuing analogy, and today's thumbnail reflects it, that Republicans may be playing a game of chess or checkers. It doesn't matter whether it's 1D, 2D, or 3D checkers or chess, because Democrats are doing demolition derby. They are driving a monster truck over the picnic bench where you and your friends were having a nice day trying to play a game by some rules. And until we see folks that sort of decide to engage the way the game is being played, which is not nicely and not necessarily caring about what's fair, you're not giving up as long as we actually try to fight towards constitutional principles. And there's some things that can be done, which we keep talking about here. We need to recognize that our republic was never supposed to be a democracy. Luckily, the Democrats have given you everything you need to be able to make that argument because they don't care either. And they've showed it. They have zero interest in the democratic process. That's why they put the person that they have in their contention for the White House. That's why they did the Indiana Jones sandbag switch from the old, broken, doddering, confused, teleprompter requiring Joe Biden to this like cringy high school talking to kids like they're toddlers, non-mom, mamala figure, whatever this thing is that's actually running. So we're going to have a little fun with that. What else do I got on here? A handful of basically a survey of courses of action that the Biden administration is engaged in. We're going to go and we're going to talk about the quick so-called scandal of Donald Trump actually meeting with families of victims in Afghanistan of a bombing. Maybe we can actually refocus that the way that it ought to be. J.D. Vance did a good job on it as well. And then we'll kind of wrap up with this sort of ongoing silliness, this Twitter drama, this sort of like conservative incorporated group. Listen, if you get full coverage by a bunch of people that are in established media that have very large followings, if you get full coverage, you're part of the media. You know, we in the independent media space love to sort of bash in on the media. But I would say that if you've worked for Fox News, if you have connections to a news network with a multi-million-dollar newsroom, and they have producers, and it's not just a guy sitting here in a room by himself, pushing all the buttons himself, and everybody wants to come to your aid, it feels a lot like a pyramid scam. Like, do all these people have have all these ghosts and skeletons in their closet to be dragged out? I don't get it. There's people coming out of the woodwork that I'm told are deep state intel types, and to be careful. It's like, be careful of what? I found this on Google. How exposed are these people? So we're going to kind of catch up on the Julie Kelly thing at the end, and I won't belabor it. It's not actually that interesting, other than I've got some evidence that continues to develop. It's not things that I really care that much about. It doesn't take that much work on my end, but I will tell you, it looks like felony territory. So that's kind of fun. So stick around for that. All right, let's play ball. Let's first start off with my buddies over at Catholic Vote. If you guys aren't getting the loop, which I actually forgot to check today because I got so distracted by thinking about court cases, get catholicvote.org. Go there, fill out the information, get yourself a copy of the loop. Let's see what the loop has in it today. I'll do it right here with you. catholicvote.org, fill out for the loop. It says new report scrutinizes Harris' role in the border crisis. So you've got some people coming in from the Catholic Accountability Project. That's good because there are some Catholic groups that are working poorly down there. Catholic Charities has been doing some stuff. No one is more critical than abuses with the name Catholic on it than my buddies over at Catholic Vote. I can tell you, like, they're pretty extreme. The women there wear veils to church. They're closer to the kind of people that you'd expect the FBI to be surveilling. Anyway, faith, family, and freedom, those are the values that dictate it. It's at Catholic Vote on the social media platforms. If you guys want to follow what they're putting out, it's worth your time, but especially the loop. Analysis about abortion and whether or not it is, in fact, a winning issue that Democrats think it is. Go out there and check it out. They focus a lot on pro-life things. They can't help it. Neither can I. Once you kind of know what's out there in the world and how evil some of these things are. Man, I saw a video the other day of forceps dismantling a human fetus, just a killed baby. And it's horrifying. It's as horrifying as something that Garrett O'Boyle sent me last night, which I have no idea what it is, but it was apparently guys in Nigeria that were eating fingers. And I'm going to just try to believe that they were not eating fingers because I just don't want to deal with cannibals in 2024. That's not what I've got in my heart, but it looks to be guys eating fingers. So maybe they have some finger-shaped yams or vegetables or something like that. Gross. In any case, once you see some things about certain people in the world, you know how evil it is, and you know that there is real evil and that we can't really do anything about it. All right. So Corey Lewandowski has joined the Trump campaign. It's worth noting that he's gotten in there. I've had some favorable folks reach out and tell me that I don't know anything about Corey, but he seems like his reputation is not scarred in my head. And so I want to play a little video of him. He's making the argument that Kamala Harris is actually an easier target than Joe Biden. And I think that's probably true. Because Joe Biden has all this years of history and he can lean back on speeches that were actually meaningful. And even when he's basically retarded and this old man that doesn't know what's going on, he's like doing grab bags and smoothies. He doesn't do the awkward word salad, and people had low expectations. One of the things that matters so much is your expectations. If somebody comes up and it's an 8-year-old kid, we had this at church the other day, so this is a good example. If you have an eighth grader, let's say, not an 8-year-old, but an eighth grade kid gets up to the podium and they're going to read something at your church service, at Mass. And they do a terrible job. You kind of go like, okay, they're in 8th grade. Unless you have 8th graders that are bright. And I have a screwy memory where I can actually remember being an 8th grader and memorizing passages out of the Bible to go up and read because I didn't want to screw it up. I wanted to do the right inflection. I wanted to have the right phrasing. So I remember being an 8th grader and I was way better. This is one of the reasons that Kamala is really terrible. But if you have low expectations, you're like, oh, it's a kid. I'm going to write it off. It's a kid. Then you get the same person doing the same thing, but it's a 40-year-old, let's say a 40-year-old man or woman getting up there doing a mediocre job that you would expect from an 8th grader. You're like, this person, this grown-up has an 8th grade reading level, an 8th grade reading style. And then you just go like, okay, I don't think that they're very good at this. Kamala Harris doesn't have the excuse of being old. She's supposedly very charismatic. There are people comparing her to Barack Obama. So the expectations are incrementally higher than someone who's Joe Biden. And they're like, he's like old Joe. We know him and he's friendly and he's been around for a long time. Yeah, he hung out with racists and says racist stuff. But like, what did you think he thought? He's 80 something years old. You go, okay, good to go. Kamala is 59. She's not even 60 yet, although she acts like a teenager, which is very strange. And I think that's a lot of it because she was never a mother and she wasn't an adopted mother either. So those of you who are like, well, adopted moms are moms too. I agree. Yeah, if you raise children, you raise children. Even if you didn't bear them, there is a maternal thing that happens. But not when you move into a house where the kid is 16 years old and that's the youngest and the oldest one is already in college. And then you skip out on the 16-year-old's high school graduation. Like, you're not a mom. Sorry, you're not. There are aunts and uncles in that family that are far more maternal than you are and have been there and are consistent. So when the expectations are set up and this woman talks to people like toddlers, which we will play, and you see Corey Lewandowski saying that she's an easier target and they're actually fine with going after her, the biggest piece is Kamala Harris is trying to do something that I don't know that people have seen. She's literally, I will use the word, running a campaign against her own administration that she's a part of right now. And we cannot devalue how fun that is when it comes to a debate stage, because not only has she run for president before on more radical positions, so you can hold those and say, okay, you kind of have these anyway. You've already said them. Have you ever walked away from them? And if so, why? The question is never like, did you change your mind? It's why did you change your mind and why should I believe you when we're talking about politicians? But here's, again, Corey talking about the ease of attacking her and the issues that they're going to have in the debate, which we kind of touched on a little bit at the end of yesterday's show.
I think Kamala's an easier target, to be very honest with you. I think she's going to be easier to beat. She is saddled with the Biden administration's policy. She has flip-flopped on what she believes and what she doesn't believe. And as it relates to the debate, Ari, just remember when the criteria for this debate was set, it was set with the Biden-Harris campaign, not just with Joe Biden. She agreed to all of the terms, specifically as it would have pertained to a vice presidential debate, which she had agreed to. And that meant you stand at the podium, there are no notes required and no notes allowed, and that we have the microphones off. She wanted to change that criteria because she went from being the vice presidential nominee to now the presidential nominee. We all agreed to what it was. Why she wanted to change it was she wanted to be the same height as Donald Trump. She wanted notes. The fact that she continues to hide from the media and the countdown clock is finally on for her of when she's going to sit down for her first national media debate should be appalling to every journalist in America that has taken her 20 plus days to sit down and do an on-camera interview.
It's a perfectly reasonable point. Why did it take so long for her to sit down in front of someone? And why does she need a tag team buddy? Right? She's had to tap in a new person so she can try to reinvent herself, basically because her record is terrible. And we're going to cover some of the records that hasn't been talked a whole lot. I think it should just be hammered home that people are actually hurting. There are difficulties in housing markets and the economy, like all the things that actually matter, those kitchen table issues that we kept hearing about earlier that the Democrats said that they're really big on. They're not. Like, she was the deciding vote in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, right? She was the one that wanted to build back America better and has essentially destroyed this country financially, at least in the short run. So how do you deal with that? She's going to have to deal with the record as it stands. And it's very hard to do when you're currently standing there. And as we said yesterday, why not give us a little taste? Anybody that's trying to sell you on something, I don't care whether it's drug dealers trying to give you the first taste for free or whether it's somebody who's giving you a professional sample and they want you to buy it for your whole office. If you've ever been in business-to-business sales, which I have, if you've been in retail sales, which I have, if you've been in a bar and you were trying to sell beer, I'll give you a taste of the beer if you want to know what this craft beer is all about. Think about this. A taster flight, you got like 70-something days, okay? Early voting starts in less than 40. We've got some time. How about you show us what you can do with what you've got because you've already been there and stop telling us that you're going to be unburdened by what has already been done. There's no reason that these people, I really like that J.D. Vance keeps using the term promotion, that they've done a crap job. You don't promote people who are worse. There's actually an exception to that. And I think some of you guys know about this. It's called the Peter principle oftentimes. This is the F up, move up principle that exists in the government. Waltz, right? Walz and Kamala Harris are both lifelong government employees, never worked in the private sector. So maybe we understand that they think the screw up, move is reasonable. That's the only place that I've ever seen that consistently. Outside of nepotistic corporations, you don't find that the worst always get promoted. You always have bad managers. That's always possible. Right? They can slip through the cracks because they say the right things, they kiss the right butts, and that happens. But you really cannot find another place other than the government, and the federal government is the best at it, where the worst people consistently make it up the rung. So it does make sense that she's looking for a promotion despite not being good at it. Let's talk about some of these things that they've done. This is a nice little way to wake up in the morning. This was a story that was coming out today. AP News. I'm just going to pivot over here on my other screen. Supreme Court rebuffs Biden administration. They plead to restore a multi-billion-dollar student debt plan. What is going on with that? It turns out the Supreme Court said you can't buy votes. That's not how they said it, of course. But this was always an attempt to say we're going to use OPM, other people's money, the thing that Margaret Thatcher used to know you run out of. That's why communism doesn't work. They were going to use OPM to buy votes by trying to write off debt. When you write off debt, it means the American people have assumed it, or the people who had on their ledger. These are almost always like co-signed federal loans. It just means that they've just made money. What? They've created money. It's the same problem with the inflation. You can't print money and you can't wipe debts off because that allows money that didn't exist previously. There has to be this balance. If you don't hold accountability, the money has no anchor. And the Supreme Court just said, you guys don't have the authority to do that. Like, Congress didn't pass the law, which they probably could have done. You didn't have the votes. The people have not spoken. And in many ways, I would suggest to you that these are actually taxes. They're taxes on all of us. I paid my student loan debts. Quick little personal story on that, because many of you understand financial responsibility. And if you don't, get on the bandwagon. This is how you become a conservative. You have to be able to be responsible for your own things. If you sign your name on the line which is dotted, as Alec Baldwin famously says in Glengarry Glen Ross, the sort of Bible movie of all old school salespeople that do it really hard. And yeah, it is Alec Baldwin. It's one of his great. Name me another movie where somebody's in the movie for like 6 minutes and they get a title role. The only other one I can think of is Executive Decisions, where Steven Seagal was in it for 5 minutes. And then he blew off in some sort of like weird umbilical cord on a stealth bomber, and then he disappeared. Like, he was only in there for a second. You're like, hey, where's Steven Seagal go? In any case, there's not a lot of places where you can get this through. You cannot buy votes. And once you sign your name to the line which is dotted, and I will always hear that angry sort of thing pounding on the table, that's your word. That's your bond, unless you have no ability, no honor. Yes, there's bankruptcy. There's some other things you can do, but let's be real. If America shrugs off its debt, it ruins our personal credit rating. If the country does it, it lowers our country's credit rating and our solvency. Unacceptable. It's just not okay. And thankfully, despite the fact that the Secretary of Education tried to do this, the Supreme Court said, no, you can't continue making this happen. You cannot make hourly workers and regular people and blue collar folks that did not go to college and didn't assume these debts. They went into apprenticeships that were paid. They provide services that people cared about. They did something and they got paid for it. They didn't have to go into debt to get the underwater basket weaving job or to get the gender studies in South-Saharan Africa, whatever the heck it is that people are studying these days. You can't put other people's debt on the American people. Thankfully. Last year, the Supreme Court conservative majority, they always like to do, this is the AP, so it's a conservative majority. I'm going to show you, they're not that conservative, people. This cry about this fascist court, like, they let the Biden administration continue to push social media companies, which is partially why I was very interested. If you guys saw an interview that Tucker and Mike Benz did, I like Mike Benz a lot. He mentions that Mark Zuckerberg, like, for all of his sympathies towards the Democrats, he's got to be fed up with it because they keep getting pushed and there is not enough of a pound of flesh that they can give to the government to get the protections that's going to allow them to just avoid scrutiny. Basically, the government is a taskmaster that wants more and more and more, like someone who doesn't know how to pay their own debts and doesn't know how to keep their own word. It's the same problem as agreeing to pay the mob. Now you've always got to agree to pay the mob. And it's even more dangerous when your friends agree to pay the mob because now you all do. But if you all stand up as a group and say, no, we're not going to do this, which is what should have happened for big tech when the government came to push on them, you would have been better off. In any case, this Supreme Court is not that conservative. It is lightly conservative, it is right of center, and they're basically doing things that are common sense, saying that if Congress didn't pass it, the executive doesn't have the authorities to do this. Again, we can go back to the very simple understanding of the way that our constitutional republic was set up. Here's another one. Like, we keep having to fight the same battles over and over again. This is a judge, this is coming from CBS, blocks the Biden administration trying to give legal status to immigrant spouses. There's a way to come to this country legally. There's a bunch of ways, actually. And you can certainly marry somebody. And then you can apply while you're overseas and you can bring them here and they can get legal status. They can become what's called an LPR. That's the green card holder. And then they can eventually become a citizen. If somebody's been living here for 20 years and they suddenly become a citizen because they get married to somebody, we are now cutting other people out. That is not the way our system's supposed to work. So we either have rules or we don't. And for whatever reason, as I keep saying, Republicans want to keep playing by the old rules, and Democrats are like, let's just smash it down and try anything. They are throwing legal spaghetti against the wall, finding out that very little of it sticks, but some of it does, and that's always a win. That's what progress looks like to them. It's a progression. It's a march, even to the point where it actually goes against their own interests, which we've seen, I think, with the gay rights movement. It was fine. Maybe not on a religious level, but like on a libertarian level, it was fine. You guys could, you want to have somebody to be able to say, make your medical decisions for you. That was always the argument I heard when I was a kid. Can they just have someone at their bedside? If you're gay, can another person who's gay be at your bedside? Like, they should have rights like a spouse. It's like, okay, why is the hospital even interested in who's next to your bed if you want someone next to your bed? Fill it out in paperwork, give power of attorney, whatever. It's not the same to be married as to have someone who's been your, live-in boyfriend for a couple of weeks. That's not the same thing, but like, family is family. I get it. Friends that you make your family are your family. So what? Like, the government doesn't need to get involved in that. But then it just kept going and it kept going. And now we're at the point where it's like, you have to castrate your kids or you're a bigot. You have to believe in abortion or otherwise you're not for LGBTQIA people. It's like, most of these people have chosen lives that do not involve reproduction, whether they had a choice or not. There is some decision. You have agency. You can be celibate or not or whatever. You can still choose to go against your impulses and your urges, however unsatisfying that is. I don't know anything about all that. All I know is you're pushing an envelope that has now gotten into crazy town because you have the Secretary of State in Michigan. You have the AG in Michigan saying that drag queens are awesome. They make everybody happy. I'm like, so do clowns, but I don't want them all around my house. All of the slippery slope arguments that have been made on almost all of this stuff, whether it be illegal immigration, whether it be sort of the gay liberty movement, all the stuff about trying to ease the economy, government interventionism, they're all correct. They're all proven correct. And that's why they're not liberals. And you won't hear me say the word liberals because there's nothing liberal about taking other people's stuff and giving it to somebody else. That's illiberal. That is taking away freedoms. If we were talking about liberals, they would go to like basically anarchy libertarian, of which those are illogical people, but I can deal with them because we have the same principles. I just think that there do have to be rules. We just have to agree that they're the rules that were set up when the country was founded. If you listen to my buddy, I did an interview with Sean Witzman, and I actually recommend going back and listening to that because as we're talking again about the J6 drama and journalists, he was also a journalist, kind of a gonzo journalist, participatory journalist, but still a journalist as recognized. Nobody would say Hunter S. Thompson was not a journalist. He was a weirdo, but he was a journalist. And Hunter S. Thompson engaged in gonzo journalism. So go listen to Sean Witzman and the interview we did. It's one of the better interviews I think he's ever done, per him, not per me. And the fact is he was there on January 6th. He was rolling around doing this stuff. And he said in real terms, I'm an anarchist, but in practical terms, I'm a constitutionalist. It stuck with me for a very long time because, it only works. You can only be an anarchist within a system that basically makes sure that you don't die being an anarchist. And that ends up being kind of a constitutionalist. That's if you're a federalist, or more likely you're going to be an anti-federalist if you're in that thing. It means you think that the smallest government is best to the point of no government. So you want to reduce it to the point where we don't need it, but since we'll never have perfect people, you won't get there. That's fine. I'm fine with those people. Like I said, that's not what the political left is doing right now. They've marched right past the position of whatever liberal equals freedom, and now they've gone into tyranny. You must agree with what I have to say. So that's how you end up dealing with people trying to get free status in this country and judges going like, look, go get the consensus. Pass the laws if you want. The president cannot unilaterally put people in this country and give them citizenship. That's not what the executive is designed or empowered to do. And more importantly, the numbers of people, because we keep hearing about things like the replacement theory, and that's never supposed to happen, and it's a terrible idea, and like it's racist if you believe in replacement theory, except they're actually trying to replace people and voters. They've literally tried to do it because they said there's 500,000 plus people affected by this order that the Biden administration did unlawfully, according to this judge, that has been blocked from going into effect. And the president said, well, the judge is wrong. Whatever happened to the power of the judiciary is an equal power. It's supposed to be the check and the balance. They don't care. He said it's just a single district court judge in Texas, and they're wrong. Do you recall how many of Donald Trump's policies that he did without Congress, that he wrote up, that got stopped by a judge? Every freaking one of them. I kept reading this for 4 straight years of Donald Trump. It was like, here's a good idea. We're going to do this. And then a judge would stop it. And they were obviously powers that were actually within the executive. Not all of them, but a whole bunch of them. They were clearly executive authorities, and they were all being stopped by judges who were leftists. And now you're seeing sort of the same game on the other side. This is like 2 slugs smashing into each other and going nowhere, which is why the gridlock of DC is supposed to happen. You're supposed to accept it. The federal government's not supposed to have the power. This is the whole point. Democrats say, oh, our government's not working for us. The courts are holding us up. They're slowing us down. We're trying to make progress. Here's the New York Times talking about the exact same story. I just wanted to show you it's getting covered roundly. They're all very upset about this. But the problem is that you're not supposed to see federal progress. You're supposed to be individual liberties, sort of handed out and dealt with and adjudicated. And if they're going to be infringed, they should be at the smallest level possible, like the family level, like the city level, the county, and then the state. The federal government is the last tool. It's the first tool they like to use. Blanket. Everyone do what we say. It's a revolution that has to come from the 10th Amendment, I think, which is not an accident. And it wasn't just put in place because they needed a nice round number. The 10th Amendment says that anything that's not written in the Constitution, these are not authorities that you have, they're left to the states, which actually does tell us a little bit more about one of the other weird, wacky cases. I'm going to jump ahead to one of them here, if you don't mind. This was the other one. You guys remember this? The Biden administration was fighting to keep our border open. Can Kamala Harris own this? I do think she actually is an easier candidate for some reasons. And this is one of them. They were fighting with the state of Texas, which has a huge stretch of border that runs along the Rio Grande River. And they had this barrier. I didn't realize how small this barrier actually was. That barrier you're seeing on the screen right there, these are the orange floaties that if you grab them, you like roll backwards like a Ninja Warrior kind of a thing. If you got up on top of them, they're like barrels you're trying to keep balanced on. They put these darn things up. And the whole point was there was 1,000 feet of water. 1,000 feet of water that was blocked off by some plastic floaties that were anchored in the middle of the river. And I guess you could swim underneath them, but I guess they dropped some kind of a barrier there, as I understood it. And there's like these like spinny plastic floaties. And the Biden administration went to war in court over this, trying to stop Texas from screwing up their border authority that they refused to participate in. What the heck is going on? So let Kamala Harris run against the record that she did. She can't be unburdened by this stuff. It's unfortunate. The Fifth Circuit, the Court of Appeals, they were like, the state needs the federal government's permission. This is terrible. The state should be solving this problem, but actually the federal government, like what happens when the federal government doesn't do what it's supposed to do? The amusing thing is our founders didn't necessarily put provisions for the states to come after the federal government if the federal government didn't do the things it was doing. So we have 2 things happening at once under the Harris administration, the Biden-Harris administration. 1, the federal government is doing things they are not allowed to do. And 2, they are not doing things that they are required to do. Let her run on that record. They have turned government dysfunction into an art form. So why do we need you? It doesn't make a ton of sense. She's also done some things on fossil fuels. So let's talk about that real briefly. Biden administration has been barred from using civil rights laws. Of course, look at this. This is a people holding BLM Power Fist, the Black Power Fist up there, and these rise. By the way, I have it on credible authority, like sat in briefings about it, that using the word rise against is part of some kind of a supremacy. They've gone after a group called the Rise Against Movement in Los Angeles and in Alaska and a couple of other places in the United States because they're white supremacists. Meanwhile, if you're a black person and you use the same exact language, no big deal. Black supremacy is not a problem in this country, except like we saw 2020 and the George Floyd riots. So maybe it is. Why do they have rainbow umbrellas? It's like, stop crossing these streams. These rules were written for better or for worse. And rather than go out and get new legislation, which is what they ought to do, if there was actually a mandate, if there was actually a consensus, if they were actually ruling with the consent of the governed, then they would actually go out and do something like use the legislative process to get whatever crappy laws they want through. They can't. So they're trying to reinterpret. They're doing the mind pretzel routine so that they can try to squeeze something through an old law that they already got through a long time ago, and they're trying to get more and more out of it. They are now squeezing the rind of the orange because they've gotten rid of the fruit and they are trying to squeeze maybe like the bitter oils out of this so they can try to make fracking and fossil fuel projects something to do, with civil liberties, with civil rights, which we're actually just trying to stop, like Jim Crow laws. I mean, it's just, but that's what happens when you start attaching these things like environmental justice, like you start talking about racial justice, with all the different justices that they talk about, which are all just variations on Marxism. They're more than happy to sub in one thing is as good as the other. And that's what's happening in this case too. So this story goes back to only about 4 or 5 days ago. This is a recent story. I didn't hear a whole lot about it, but we're starting to hear more about the energy issue because 1, prices at the pump. 2, this is what we're looking at electing for the next 4 years. We already kind of know what Donald Trump did. Cheap gas, right? Mean tweets. That's a pretty good story. Let's do the fracking policy. Let's talk about fracking. Let me do her discussing her policy while she was running for office the first time around because she was trying to run to the radical left. Again, I tend to agree with Corey. This is relatively easy to show when somebody flip-flops, like they don't have any principles. So it makes it a much easier line of attack. And all they can do is go, no, I never said that.
I am committed to passing a Green New Deal, creating clean jobs, and finally putting an end to fracking once and for all.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yes, and starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right? And then there has to be legislation. But yes, and this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue.
Kamala Harris is inspiring and very capable. She's prepared to be commander-in-chief.
Oh, that was Bob Casey. You might recognize him from the donations, the political contributions of the Kelly family. So that's fun. But we're looking at that's her position on fracking. And then so you just ask the question, hey, did she change her position? Is the fracking situation different now than it was then? Let's just ask.
Vice President has changed her position on fracking in Pennsylvania. Do you know why she's changed her position?
Listen, I mean, she's been very clear here. She's proud of the work that she's done as a part of this administration, making sure that American energy production is at an all-time high. We want to continue that progress into her first term in office here. And again, I think whether it's energy policy, economic policy writ large, that you have a fighter in Kamala Harris who is actually keeping the interests of the American people front and center. Coming together to bring people together in search of solutions that actually improve people's quality of life, improve our economy, improve energy production. I think that stands, again, in stark contrast to Donald Trump.
Can we just listen to the beginning of that one more time? I'm going to have him ask the question, and I want to play the opening of the response. I want you to listen to it and imagine that Sideshow Bob, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House spokesperson, is the one who's answering this. It's actually incredible to me watching people mirror the same vocal patterns, the same words. What he says, and I'm going to prep you for it, then I'm going to play it in his own words so he can say it again. But what he says is she's really proud of the work that she's done and then chooses not to answer the question. It's amazing that that's where they go. They don't answer the question. They don't even necessarily deny it. They just sort of answer whatever the hell they want. This is something my dad and I talked about when we did an interview on this program. It's the thing that Ronald Reagan was really good at. He's way better. Ronald Reagan actually sounds way better unless you're just trying to hammer him to it and you ask over and over again. Not even close to touching the question, why has she changed her position on fracking? It's such an easy answer too. This is the thing I don't get because I'm seeing this on social media right now and we'll finish the show with some of that little stuff. It's so straightforward. It's like, look, every human being can grow. Positions change over time. After evaluating new evidence, we have a new position. And then you would say, well, what is that new evidence? It's like, well, some of the policies didn't work out the way that we hoped. And so we're willing to learn, just like all Americans. We'd ask that they are understanding that we are going to adapt and use better policies as they come along. And this is the best one that's available now. So that's where we're going with it. Okay, like punch holes in that. And then you're like, you changed your mind because you have a better idea now. And you're like, yep, people who are grown-ups get better ideas and then they do better ideas. The end. They don't do that. They cannot admit wrong, which is what my buddy Garrett O'Boyle always talks about. Pride, hubris. It's on the left and the right. But this Karine Jean-Pierre style is so specific. And it is like a female Democrat thing. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, I guess. But there's a female Democrat thing that says, I will not own responsibility. It's the thing they teach you, like in, somebody was telling me it's what they learned in evasion school. I didn't learn this in SEER the same way, so this is not a classified technique. This is like a joke that's out there. But they're basically like, confirm nothing, deny everything, make counter accusations, right? Admit nothing, deny everything, make counter accusations. So that's kind of what they do. First couple seconds of this one more time, just for you to hear.
Vice President has changed her position on fracking in Pennsylvania. Do you know why she's changed her position?
Listen, I mean, she's been very clear here. She's proud of the work that she's done as a part of this administration.
The president has been very clear about his position about this, and now I'm going to talk about not this. That's it. It's like my buddy used to do this to me. This is a trick you guys can use. He used to come after me and say something that would be really hurtful as a joke. And I'd be like, dude, I'm like, what's wrong with you? And then he would immediately start not saying he was sorry, but he would be like, I said I'm sorry. And you're like, oh, well, okay. Claiming that you did something and actually doing something are different. And so like if you said, I said I'm sorry, but you never said I'm sorry, you're like, I know you're getting away with something right there. They do this. They do it really well. And apparently the Democrat voters just love it. They love it, maybe because they like being talked to like young children. Before we get into that, let me talk about my buddies at Patriot Coolers. You guys can support there by going to patriotcoolers.com. That is the website. They make an outstanding series of products. Some of the stuff is merch. It says Patriot on it. I use their coolers and their tumblers every single day. The cooler that we have, the 50-quart cooler, rides around in the back of my minivan. And if you are living in a hot area like I do, if you live below the Mason-Dixon line, I would say, or California or New Mexico, you're making a terrible decision not to carry around a cooler in the back of your vehicle if you go to grocery stores, especially when you go to the grocery store as often as we do, which is like multiple times a week, it seems like. Frozen foods, cold foods, cheeses, dairy, it doesn't spoil because we put it in an outstanding Patriot cooler. They make very, very quick turnaround of your order, and you can save 10% by using the promo code KYLE. They look really good. They're a really good product. There's just nothing more to it. If you're in the market, whenever you're in the market, whenever you need to replace an old tumbler, or you lose your Stanley, or you decide that you don't want lead-based paint in it, whatever, check them out. PatriotCoolers.com, KYLE. That's how you get there, and you'll save some money. And they support vets and help rebuild their houses, which is awesome. Good people. Okay, I don't know if Democrats like being talked to like toddlers, if that's just a thing. It infuriates me. It is yet another reason why I don't like Kamala. It's somebody got mad at me. Actually, I got called a misogynist yesterday from taking clips out of my show, which like I do this publicly. I don't think women should be in charge of a lot of things. There are plenty of things that women can be in charge of, but they usually are not external, and they certainly usually don't impact me in the same way. I don't like it. I've had really, really bad experience with female NCOs. Terrible experiences. I thought they were incapable of doing the work that we were doing. So what in the hell were they doing trying to lead? Because they couldn't. I didn't like that. I had really bad the worst bosses I've ever had in my life were all women, exclusively. And then we're hearing some of this like kind of pushback. Oh, Kyle's a jerk because he don't like women in charge. Look at January 6th. We got this stupid thing going on right now. Stupid in many ways, but stupid going on with Julie Kelly on social media. And it's taken up a couple of days of my time, and it's kind of like absurd. Like I said, I'll touch on the end of it, but she made this argument like Kyle's a mean misogynist. And if you don't, it's like, well, let's just look at some females that were in charge of things. Lisa Monaco is functionally running the DOJ, and has been there since Trump's time. And she is doing some really, really bad prosecution of J6ers. Jennifer Moore was the executive assistant director of human resources. We found out that there was a female in charge of the Secret Service. We found that there were female SACs in the National Security Branch that ran all these investigations into J6ers at the FBI, right? I mean, Yogananda Pittman was apparently over at Capitol Police screwing things up. How many? Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House. I don't like women being in charge. That's just all I'm saying. It's like, take that for what it's worth. I just don't. You don't get to tell me no. I don't like women reading at church either. Whenever I hear it, I go like, nah, you're not proclaiming. If you don't like that, I don't care. That's a conservative position. It turns out that men leading is a conservative thought. That's the way that it's been for all of humankind. Women can lead in other ways, in other places. Women are the ultimate lobbyist, it turns out, inside our own houses. I take into account what my wife says all the time, whether she knows it or not. I care about her feelings. I care about her outcomes. I care about what's best for her. And sometimes when she says something that's not a good idea, I just go like, we're not going to do that because it's not a good idea for you, because your emotion got away from you, because you want to do things that are kind and I want to do things that are right. There's moments where she wanted to take in people that had really, really bad stories. And it's like, well, let's look at their stories. Are we going to actually help them with it? Does giving somebody money solve their problem? No. How about helping them form better habits? That would be good. Do you want to do that? Okay, let's do that. The caring-based professions are very important. Nursing, therapies, mental health. I get all that stuff. 100%. They also need the other hand. There's a yin and a yang. There's a balance, and they have to be done. There has to be a balance. And having women in leadership roles, particularly a bunch of them, for no particular reason, when they are not very representative of the corporate workforce or of the law enforcement or of the military, like it's disordered, people. I used to say that the reason that women don't belong in special operations is because the Venn diagram of women that are able and the Venn diagram of women that are interested does not overlap more than a few. Most of the women that are able to do the special operations sort of work, that are able to do the physical standards that are required and have the mental toughness to get into it, they become professional athletes. They go out there and do things in their sphere that makes more sense. They're not looking for like combatives like men. We've got guys in our chat right now that know what it's like. Being a warrior is not an easy thing. It's vicious, and we're vicious to each other. We have to be. If you're not hard on each other, the enemy will end you. And so anyway, I just don't want that. It's really simple. I was getting off my track here because what I said is that apparently Democrats want to be talked to like toddlers. Here is Tim Walz, high school football coach. I never met a high school football coach that I was like, I want to follow that person into battle. I was like, that's a mediocre human being that's doing some mediocrity. Or maybe they were an awesome human being and it was just a job that they did. But like, I never saw the greatest leaders in the world in a high school football locker room. Maybe you did. Feel free to fill it out in the comments and let me know that there are great leaders happening. A lot of times they're kind of like okayest leaders and mediocre social studies teachers. That's what I saw. In my case, we had an English teacher, actually, Bob Wunderlich. He was a really good guy. I liked him. I don't think he should be president, though. Kamala, talking to kids like toddlers. This is what happens when you don't have kids and you don't know that like 17 and 18-year-olds can be talked to like grown-ups, and they should be.
Our country is counting on you. All of you. You are leaders. By the very fact that you all are here in this room, doing what you do at this incredible school, doing it as one big team, understanding all of the different parts that fit together to create a team.
You are so important and special, and you should use your crayons wisely and only use your glue judiciously and share all of it so your friend who's a tard will eat it. A couple little things. For those of you that are pointing out that your wife is different, I don't care. Mine is too. I'm talking about general rules. Is your wife common? Did you find a bunch of your wives out there in the world? No. Oh. Are they a unique diamond that you are like so grateful to find? How about that? If your spouse doesn't seem like the thing that you see everywhere in the country, then don't use them as an example. They're the exception. And I'm totally fine with there being a lot of exceptions. That's really important. It's very weird to me that Kamala Harris is talking to children that are basically right on the edge of voting age like they are babies. I talk to my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old at a much more advanced level. And on top of that, she also doesn't care about their protection. So this is her position about getting rid of the police in schools, demilitarizing the schools. She doesn't really think real things about gun safety. She thinks that you should be disarmed, not that we should protect our children. I think it's dumb. I think it's not an acknowledgement of reality. But if you talk to people like toddlers, maybe you also deal in rainbows and clouds and finger painting. And this is a finger painting idea.
Being incarcerated for a couple of days is traumatic, much less the weeks, months, and years that we're seeing that happen. And so part of my plan is also a reduction of that. And then also, again, what we need to do about demilitarizing our schools and taking police officers out of schools. We need to deal with the reality and speak the truth about the inequities around school discipline. We're in particular.
Okay, that's what we need to do. Maybe that's why they're trying to do this kind of stuff. This is another court case. Supreme Court rejected the trans student rule. Again, trying to abuse existing laws, trying to pigeonhole things in where they don't belong, kind of like trying to get somebody to have a penis that actually has a vagina, or trying to make a vagina out of an existing penis. Yeah, that's like when you take a law. They're trying to trans the law, are they not? I just thought of that right now. It's not right. And the Supreme Court was like, guys, if you want a stupid law, just pass the stupid law. You can't get it? You can't do it. Of course, the 4 justices referred to by Bloomberg as liberal, but they are not liberal. They are leftists. You can't side with trying to transition the law over, which the federal judges said it was grossly overbroad, and they ended up blocking the entire rule. They're trying to redefine what words mean to their convenience. This is a classic leftist move. It is progressive. We should have a whole thing about transing laws, because that is a classic Democrat. It means you don't want to do the work. It's like, oh, I've got a house. We could also make it a meeting room. Like, I guess I've transed this room. It's a bedroom, but I've made it into a podcast studio, right? There's times when we're kind of okay with that individually for yourself. You don't get to do the whole thing on the law. Stop transing our laws, literally and figuratively. It was supposed to design strength for protections for pregnant and postpartum students. How about we work towards some conservative values where maybe some students aren't having babies? That'd be good. That'd be good. I don't really want high school kids having babies. It worked in biblical times. They had a little bit different maturity curve there, and probably a little different life expectancy. Not great. It continues on. So when you keep talking to kids like they're toddlers and you keep trying to say that you don't want to protect them, I just don't get it. They want to celebrate it. This is a little celebration of tyranny. This is Kamala Harris telling you about how powerful she is. Yet another thing to run against. It's like, hey, she was a prosecutor. She didn't do a great job. She sort of just reveled in the power. Here's some great quotes for that.
You know, the power I have as a prosecutor is that with a swipe of my pen, I can charge someone with a misdemeanor, the lowest level offense possible. And by virtue of that swipe of my pen, you will have to go to a courthouse and stand in line. You will have to come out of pocket and hire an attorney. You may get arrested for a few hours. You will be embarrassed in your community. You will miss time from coming onto the Google campus. All because with the swipe of my pen, I've charged you with a crime, which I may choose to dismiss 2 weeks later. It's an incredible amount of power.
I think there's something to be said about what they're doing there, because I think she's trying to make the thing that the power should be used judiciously. I want to give her some fairness on that. The problem is the way you present information says a lot about what you think about that information. I actually remember saying something to the effect that being an FBI agent is an awesome power and responsibility. I said it to James O'Keefe. It was muffled and whatever. It was shadowed. But I went out there and said that because it's an awesome power and responsibility, and you have to use it judiciously. I didn't revel in the power part of it. She just reveled in the power part of it. And so even though she's probably doing it as a cautionary tale that it should be only given to people that are worth the trust, she's saying it in a way that I don't believe that she thinks the same way I do about being judicious about power. And probably you have that same sense. And yes, of course, most of you here, I'll throw it on the chat. The chat line is talking about the Barack Obama, I have a pen and a phone attitude. It is tyranny. It's tyrannical. And apparently that's what Democrats want to celebrate. They would like that. They would love to be able to use these sort of things in their favor. And they don't apologize for it. They want to sort of elect a king. I tweeted this out this morning if you guys saw it. And it's like, we do understand what you guys are about. You want to give lip service to democracy, whatever the heck that means to you, but I call it the tyranny of the majority. You want to give lip service to it while you actually just get somebody installed as a king or as a tyrannical ruler that makes you feel good about their tyranny. That's what they're doing. That's what they continue to play with. It's a hard sell to someone like me. Again, I actually care about liberty. I actually care about fighting against tyranny. I kind of want to do everything I can to not be involved in that. I don't want it for my kids. That's what this is actually about. So these stories, they're troubling to me simply because you don't have to be like this. All right. There's nothing that makes you do this. So the legacy, and again, we're going to go back to Corey Lewandowski's point. The legacy of all of this should be, you have to own a crap economy, a series of court losses, not just like losses in the district courts, whatever, and then you just moot point it. Supreme Court losses on fundamentally disgusting overreaches. You have to live on the legacy of throwing out federal employees, of getting rid of cops, of pressuring people, of censorship. Those are illiberal positions. They continue to be. And then the end result is it sucks for regular people. And so here is a 74-year-old man talking about things. This guy could be the poster child that Donald Trump holds up and just says, are you a retiree? Because a lot of retirees have time to go vote. Are you ready to go back into the workforce at 75? because you have to, not because you want to? Is that what we're going to try to do? This guy's face should be everywhere. And the guys like him. He's not alone. I know he's not unique. And so do you.
A paid internship at 74 years old is the plot of a Hollywood movie, but the stark reality for Barry, who is their star intern here at Career Source Ballard, helping others find employment.
When you tell your friends you're an intern, what do they say?
Are you crazy? You're supposed to be retired. And I have 3 different retirements, and it's not enough. I can't afford to eat. Can't afford to pay my utilities. I'm barely making my condo payment.
It's not a good position for a retiree in this country, in America in 2024, with all the prosperity that we've had and that we should have. So I do think that the idea, and I'm not a MAGA guy, guys, you guys know that. I only say that because I think it lends credibility to what a great slogan it is. It's an aspiration that we have been better, we can do better, and it turns out we're not doing as great as we ought to be. So let's aspire. It's aspirational. And it's actually concrete. It's like make the economy great again, make food healthy again. I keep seeing all these little like variations on the MAGA piece, and they're catchy, but they're catchy because they actually aspire to American values. Not be a joyful warrior. Like F you. What does being joyful have to do? Like I'm fairly confident that there were some really joyful Nazis doing some really horrific stuff. And when I say that, I don't do it by accident, because I actually think that the Harris regime, the Biden-Harris administration that took ownership of the Justice Department, which I would make the argument has been a Democrat organization for a long time, that group came in and pushed absolutely genocidal and tyrannical mandates. And they did it joyfully, by the way. I'm sure they were thrilled about it. They were like, we're going to find the Kyle Serafins and the Garrett O'Boyles. We're going to find the Steve Friends that exist in this space. We are going to squeeze them right the heck out, because we cannot have that if we want to have what we want, which is tyranny and power. And you better be excited about it. And if you're not going to be excited about it, and if you're not going to shut your mouth, you're done here. It's one of the first things I told my wife when we first caught up after going out of the academy. I said, I don't know if I'm going to do 20 years of this job, but I'm going to give it a shot. I gave it a really honest shot, people. I did it 6 years. That was as honest as it could be. That was eating and swallowing as much BS as possible while constantly saying, that's not right. I won't do this. This is dangerous. I did it all the time. Whistleblowing activity. I realized I was a whistleblower to that guy, John Nance, who likes to go out and talk to me. He tried to send us into his thing where supposedly there were 3 Afghan translators turned Al-Qaeda that were hanging out in Northern Virginia that had skills fighting the Taliban and fighting with the Taliban for like decades of their life. And we had people that didn't even have rifles issued to them. And I was like, this is BS. And we actually owned the rifles. The FBI had already bought the rifles. They had them in the vault, but they just couldn't make time for us to get out there and qualify on them so that we could get assigned them, even though most of us had prior military service or other law enforcement. And we were assigned other rifles, by the way. You couldn't even take a rifle with you. It was like, oh, it was a vault rifle. So you've done a qualification on it, but not on this rifle. F you, man. One rifle's as good as another. Let me go sight the damn thing in and carry it. That was the option. And I did whistleblower stuff on that too. If it was dumb, if it was dangerous, if it was illegal, immoral, or unethical, 1, I refused to do it, and 2, I pushed back every time. You don't get to last in a DOJ like that. The other fun thing that I like to see is when these tactics and these techniques, because this is going to kind of feed into our kind of follow-up here on Julie Kelly, which it's sad. It's kind of amusing to me only because it's gross, and she's so nasty. She is really nasty. For people to come out and say she's a lovely, patriotic person, she is the most vindictive and shitty person whenever she's dealt with us privately. She sends ugly stuff. She texted me at midnight. She had her brother threatening me, which is like really comical because he's a big fat guy and he's a lot older than me. It's like he was a Marine in the 90s. It's like, thanks for your service, but like also you're a fat guy and I'm not scared of you. You think that like I'm scared of other grown men? Like, do you know what I did for a living? I used to sit in the scariest neighborhoods in America. In any case, this technique continues to be used, and it's used almost exclusively by women, but it's definitely used by lefties, including this effeminate guy. So I'm going to play you a quick video. Listen to this sort of like, I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not even going to dignify you with a response. This Hillary Clinton style, don't acknowledge it and run away from it, is something we're seeing right now. And so that's not good.
And with this, has Joe Biden ever used a teleprompter during local interviews or to answer Q&A with supporters?
Brett, we are not going to engage. This is straight from the Trump campaign.
But yeah, they're using it.
And what it does, Brett, is it's trying to distract the American people.
They're using it. They talk about it every day. Can you say yes or no?
That's because they talk about it every day, Brett, because they don't have a coherent
well, you have
strategy.
an answer. Yes or no?
Brett, they talk about it every day because they don't have a coherent argument for why Donald Trump deserves re-election, deserves 4 more years. We know that he lied to the American people. We know that he has not shown leadership during this crisis, and they are desperate to throw anything they can against the wall.
What crisis? The Harris-Biden crisis of being president and vice president for the last 4 years? What? Yeah, we're not going to answer that. We're not going to dignify that with a response. We owe you nothing, and that's what it looks like. It looks just like this. Thanks so much for being a supporter. And then you've got this guy. This is coming from my Twitter. I'm blocked, so somebody sent this over here. I get a lot of this stuff sent over. You guys do that. It's pretty funny. This guy just says, look, I'm not a bad actor. I'm a big fan of yours, Julie Kelly. Just want to know, is it true or not? We just want a yes or no. Same as you just heard Brett Baer asking. She says, I owe you nothing. I owe you nothing, even though you might be a paid subscriber. She's been blocking paid subscribers. It's like, come on now. Come on. Do better. And here's why it gets weird. I get this kind of stuff too, folks. Here's somebody, I'm just going to read. This is a DM that came in the other day. And I'm going to read it because you might as well know. Because this is where this stuff goes. And I don't know if we're talking about a Democrat op or we're talking about somebody who was involved in a crime. But my guess is that there was a crime here. Like I said, it's multiple felonies. Please do not reveal me if you repeat the story. I'm not revealing your name. So there you go. But there's something you don't know about Julie Kelly. Here's the scoop. Julie Kelly's husband is a wealthy Democrat lobbyist. Yeah, we all know. This is a Marilyn Matlin, James Carville marriage. He couldn't control himself and adhere to the individual donor limits, so he smurfed her. And he's been using her as an additional vehicle to stuff campaign coffers. Now she's in a terrible position of having to reveal that he broke the law or quietly suffering the humiliation of looking like a hypocrite. I'd be effing furious if I were her. I said, don't tell anybody, but I already know this, which is why I put the story out. And then this person said, you aren't expecting her to out her husband as a campaign donation violator, are you? Yeah, I actually am, it turns out. If your husband is a dirtbag who breaks the law to try to move people like Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton into office and a Secretary of State that's going to run the elections for this particular term in Illinois, yeah, I actually do think that you should be a little bit forthright with this. And so here's what actually sort of is the evidence behind this kind of thing. This is a campaign donation we showed you the other day. It's for $6,000 to the Secretary of State's that ended up winning in this last cycle in Illinois, the person that's going to run the elections out there. And what you're seeing is 2001 Butterfield Road, Downers Grove, Illinois. People are like, oh my God, you're doxing your address. Of course I wouldn't do that. I would not dox somebody's personal address, even though it's public record. And you can Google it. You can find it yourself. It's actually really easy. This is the building that we're talking about right there. That is the building in Downers Grove. It's like a 25-story office building. And in Suite 110, based on the publicly available information that I found from the Chicago Lobbyist Electronic Filing System, that is the home of All Circo, which we talked about the other day, which is run by and filed by John Kelly Jr., Julie Kelly's husband. So he used his business address on her personal donation of $6,000 in the state race. And I would indicate to you that this is the opening. This is enough predication to open a federal investigation into this sort of straw donation. And I got to tell you, people in the FBI that I know will look into this kind of thing. So if you care about federal crimes and election crimes, and by the way, you should because Dinesh D'Souza, who is a very, very nice man and really just a thoughtful human being, has always been, gave me calls, told me things that I thought were very useful advice, agreed with me, but said, I kind of stay out of the fights. I don't want to be part of all this. Dinesh D'Souza went to jail for this thing. He's not allowed to own firearms because of this exact campaign finance violation, which is a felony every time you do it. Okay? Conservatives have been paying for this, but we're supposed to say, but because someone writes some stories about January 6th, and by the way, is mean and awful to real writers that were actually at the thing, has been awful to Steve Baker, has attacked Sean Witzman, who faced jail time for this, who has not acknowledged J.D. Rivera, who did jail time and is a Marine veteran, and then is talking about my family has been in it so hard and has had all these difficult things. No. So I'll leave you some comedy. If you're not a good writer, maybe you're a propagandist. I don't know how you get the sort of background in writing, but usually you just have to be able to use words correctly. I said something the other day. I said, it's pretty sad. You're 55 years old and your, Y-O-U-R, brother has a double chin on the internet making threats. It's sad and comical. And she corrected me, which is also very funny. And she said, your, Y-O-U''R-E, and you're about to F-A-F-O, which is to say F around and find out, which is a threat. And stupid, by the way. I don't fear 55-year-old women. But the best part is that she doesn't even know the right your. And I'm like, you're not ready for the big leagues. You need an editor, which is what Steve Baker and I have been talking about. And that's why these stories, which are actually relevant right now, because if you come out of a quote unquote food blogging background, maybe you organically just became a blogger about politics, and that's fine. But if your food blogging was actually you writing for the National Review, which is what this piece is, talking about big organics losing battle, folks, this is some wild stuff to try to sell. This is a wild statement in 2015 to try to sell to suburban moms. Anti-GMO movement. Okay, those of us who don't want our food genetically modified, verges on collapse as the benefits of the transgenic foods proliferate. Do you know how weird that is to make that claim? Do you know what a strange thing it is to say, feed your children like potentially poison that Monsanto and Roundup and all this other kind of stuff, like they're all good for you? Except when your husband is a big agri-lobbyist, and that's kind of like where you come from. That's the only way. There's pictures of her. You can find them online right now of her holding signs saying, I feed my kids GMOs. Weird flex, hun. It's just a strange thing. And they're also, the reason it's interesting to me is because they've tried to come after our audience. They've tried to come after our credibility. And we continue to be correct. If your husband committed felonies, I'm sorry. You're going to have to lie for him. You got to own the grift. That's one possibility. That's why I did a thing about the house divided. Either you own the grift or you admit that your husband is committing felonies. And whether or not DOJ goes after him is another animal. I have no idea. I expect not. It probably actually has very little consequences, but she can't take the hit to the credibility. Then I also want to, it's not something I'm going to share you on the screen, but let me just tell you because I'm going to read it over here. Let me put the chat up. I'll read this over here. This guy named John Basham put out his DMs that he was sharing with her because he's a contributor to her and he thinks that she's a great lady. And so he's like, look, what the heck's going on? It broke my heart to see that you gave money to Democrats. Her quote directly, these are on social media right now. I don't owe anyone an explanation. Doesn't that sound like the Democrat position that we heard from these people talking about Joe Biden? My husband is a top lobbyist in Illinois and works with almost all Democrats. Do you really think I support Joe Biden? And he's like, well, the records say you do. So what's going on? Unless your husband did that doing straw donations, but don't admit that. It's a federal crime. And her response is telling. Well, he did not. And don't put words in my mouth. Go ahead and be sad. Kyle Seraphin will be excited that you're manipulated. I'm just presenting facts. How you feel about those facts is your business. Don't screw with people when you have secrets. And so that's the overall message that I will leave with you. Again, in addition to the fact that we are watching people not playing by the rules, that happens on our own side too. So, okay, fine. But if your public life and your private life do not match, they will come out at some point. All things that are in the dark will eventually be revealed. That's the way that it works. It's awful. It's the reason why when you've gone through the vetting process for a secret clearance or a top secret clearance, and they've gone through and looked for your skeletons, it's kind of hard to hide some of your skeletons. It's why guys like Garrett O'Boyle has shown pictures of his family. It's like, come at him. Steve Friend, same story. George Hill, vetted for 30 plus years with a TSSCI. And that's the secured compartment information. That's the tighter version of the top secret clearance. I'll tell you this really, really, really clearly. My public persona is significantly meaner and way less nice than my private. Anybody who meets me in private, my wife is always like, people think you're so mean, but you're not. I'm like, I'm just mean on social media because that's what the venue does. It's really sad to watch this stuff. I would like our people to actually hold to a better standard. And the fact that everybody's come out from the conservative Inc. kind of thing and gone and protected, it's very strange. You want to protect somebody, you want to support somebody. We've got the Kyle Seraphin Show shirts. I've seen some of you say, hey, I support Kyle Seraphin and I wear the merch. The merch 100% does not benefit me other than it has my name on it. It benefits my buddy Garrett, who's still now coming up on 24 months with no paycheck. If you guys want to keep him busy in the sweatshop, the Suspendables sweatshop, the Suspendables merch store is the-suspendables.com. I benefit zero from this other than I love seeing my buddy taken care of and we're not going to let him fall down. Promo code KYLE saves you 10%. That's just because we want to. The-suspendables.com is how you go find yourself a t-shirt that's going to be able to benefit him. We got the pins, which you see us on all of our media hits wearing. There may or may not be some hats there. There may be some cold weather stuff coming in now that we're starting to move that way, but not for me. I'm about to go into September where it'll still be 1,000 degrees. So that'll be that happening. Support my buddy Garrett if you want to. If you can afford to and it doesn't put a burden on you, then we will say go for that. We appreciate it. Let's do a 5-star review. And then I've got actually a really amusing, weird, offbeat palate cleanser for you today. The 5-star review is coming from I Blame the 1960s. Me too. Who has been a good friend of our program for quite a while. Post-debate friendly Friday, 5 stars. Kyle, a retired SOCOM aviator here, and a continued monthly supporter, which we do appreciate. Your takeaways are always pointed, insightful, and straightforward without all the theatrics that some of the conservative space employ in their broadcasts. However, having Steve deliver his observation on the debate from fresh eyes was just flippin' hilarious. Stay frosty, my friend, at I Blame the 1960s on True Social. We do appreciate your 5-star reviews. You can do them over on Apple, and then if you want to leave them, I'll check out the ones on Spotify. I've been away from that for a while. Here's your palate cleanser for the day, something to kind of just send you off. What if Metallica wasn't Metallica? I apologize in advance. This will be catchy and it'll stay in your head. It sounds kind of like Michael McDonald. It reminds me of Office Space. It reminds me of 40-Year-Old Virgin, rather. Listen to this.
What if Metallica was yacht rock? Apologies in advance.
Say your prayers, little one. Don't forget, my son, to include everyone. Tuck you in, warm within, keep you free from the sin till the Sandman, he comes. Sleep with one eye open, gripping your pillow tight. Exit light, and tonight. Take my hand, we're off to Never, Neverland. Oh.
Why is that?
Why is that good? It's so good. The whole chat's going like, oh, I really like this version. I do too. I'm over here just kind of bopping back and forth. Folks, if you want to join us for additional conversation and for additional interactions, you can do so over at KyleSerafin.com. That's the Locals channel. A bunch of you guys have signed up for Locals. I'm really flattered and I'm humbled that you guys want to support us. I really am. I mean that in a sincere way. And I do owe you something, which is why I try to bring exclusive content over there, unlike some people who feel entitled to it. I'm not that guy. Okay, so it's KyleSerafin.com to join us over on Locals. God bless all of you that want to support us. God bless all of you that are just joining us to watch. I appreciate it. Share the show. Like it if you liked it. Let's do this again tomorrow. We'll see if there's a friendly Friday. There's some politics brewing in the works that has nothing to do with Steve Friend. But we'll see you again tomorrow morning.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.